Brilliant. Hello, everybody. Cathy Underwood here. I'm not in the Om Shedi Shala. I've got someone mowing my lawns, lots of noise. So here we are in my front room, actually in a building made of concrete. Right. Okay, I am joined by Lindsey Brown of Live Yoga Therapy. I met Lindsey way back in 2020 when we started training as yoga therapists with the Minded Institute. And it was really weird because the weekend that we started training was the weekend of the lockdown, I think, or just, it was nearby, wasn't it? It was around that time. So most of our training was done online, but we've all become great friends. There's about 35 of us that studied together. And although it was a 2-year course, it was more like 3 years, very intense. Yoga therapy, oh my goodness, you study neuroscience, you study yoga philosophy, you study mindfulness and ethical principles of psychiatric training as well. So it's fantastic. It's everything you need to work with clinical populations. But the wonderful thing is that Lindsey actually specializes in the menopause. So I want to ask her lots and lots of questions. But before that, over to you, Lindsey. Hello, welcome to our little podcast vlog.
Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you. We kind of hit it off straight away. Great affinity with one another. I think our energies kind of work really well together. So I'm really delighted Lindsey's agreed to have this moment with us and share her tips and ideas. So the first thing I'd like to ask you, Lindsey, is can you let us know what you do and who you are?
Thank you, Cathy. So I'm Lindsey. I've been teaching yoga for over a decade, and I got to the point where I just thought I really feel I have so much more to offer, and I want to work with more niche populations. And I've been interested in yoga therapy for a while, and I decided to just go for it. You never really understand until you start actually the workload, do you, and how much is involved. And it was, it's one of the most rigorous training courses in Europe. So I knew it was going to be challenging. And it was just, I suppose, everything I wanted and more, really. We learned so much. And just through the process of the course and some of the modules, when we came to women's health, I came away from that kind of just knowing that menopause is where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to specialize in it. I knew I wanted to help women. I knew it was something that I would be going through at some point. So from that is kind of where my main focus has been. And I wrote my dissertation on menopause, through which I learned so much more about it. And after my dissertation, I was then asked to develop the Minded's manual on menopause and then become their menopause lecturer. So it was a bit of a whirlwind, but all was brilliant. I was just felt really sure that I was going down the right path. So that's what I do. And now my idea is to go forwards and offer yoga therapy for women going through the process of menopause, whether it's perimenopause or postmenopause. We have something for that whole transition.
Well, I'm super proud of you. That's amazing. And wow, what a launch into this new field of work for you as well. So tell us, when you were putting your manual together, what did you discover? What was the essence of what you discovered about this journey for women at this time of our lives?
I think one of the biggest things that I wasn't aware of was really how much estrogen affects all of our bodily systems, right? So I know when we go through perimenopause, that's when estrogen and progesterone starts to fluctuate. It just goes like this. One is higher than the other, one really drops. So there's no consistency through it, which is why we can feel, such different mood swings, which is why we have so many of our systems affected, because it is not consistent. And then once we hit postmenopause, so just to be clear about what that is, it's once our periods have stopped for 12 months consecutively. We've then hit menopause, and then we go into the postmenopause era, if you like. Perimenopause can last 7 to 14 years. there's no real one size fits all. Some women might have it less. Some women, 10% of women actually have long postmenopause, which can last like into their 70s. So like I say, this can be different for all women. But what I was learning was that estrogen affects so many of our systems. So it's linked to things like, which we know, bone health. So we know that the risk of osteoporosis increases. It's linked to our heart health. So the risk of cardiovascular disease increases. It helps to regulate our cholesterol levels, our glucose levels, which is why some women experience more weight gain, insulin issues with insulin. Then obviously as we get older, our metabolism slows anyway, so it helps to regulate metabolism. So obviously once that starts to fluctuate, we start to have issues across so many different areas. Interestingly, it also helps protect our memory and cognition, so hence brain fog, issues with concentration, memory recall, all of these things. And it also helps with hydrating our tissues. So if you think about things like vaginal dryness, itchy skin, changes in appearance. So when we might bruise more easily. When we hurt ourselves, it might take longer to heal. It impairs the production of collagen once it starts to decline, so tissue elasticity, hence things like issues with, so we're talking about all connective tissue here. So hence issues with aches and pains, muscles, joints, etc. So when I started to learn about this, I thought, oh my God, this all makes so much sense, you know?
Yeah.
So we have estrogen receptors in our body and our brain, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah,
so basically,
I found that interesting as well. That a lot of women, including myself, used to think that it was just the sex hormone, but it's actually not. It's in our bones, tissues, brain. Estrogen is everywhere. So it's fascinating.
It's like
So no wonder we have this kind of all body experience on so many different levels. And that itchy skin thing, oh my goodness, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And actually, so much of it, women don't necessarily attribute to menopause. They just don't always put two and two together. But once you start learning how much estrogen is involved in all of that, you know, it's very clear that a lot of that is linked. And if you think about some of the receptors in the brain, so receptors are basically messengers. They receive information from the hormone and then they do their function, whatever that might be. So once estrogen starts to decline, these receptors are deprived of estrogen and therefore are less able to do their functions properly, right? So whatever that might be, so whether it's hydrating our tissues or bone health. So receptors in the brain, so just quickly coming back to the brain, we have receptors in our hippocampus, for example, which is linked to memory. We have receptors in our amygdala, which we know is linked to emotional states. We have receptors in our frontal cortex, which is linked to reasoning, executive function, decision-making, discernment. So if we think about all those receptors being deprived of oxygen, and then no wonder we experience the memory and cognition issues that we do.
Right, yeah, absolutely. That's what I find really fascinating, because it actually well, for me, it offered me, knowing all that stuff, it offered me a kind of feeling of agency over what I could do. You know, there were many things that I could do to help support those changes. And it also lessened that kind of feeling of, you know, losing my mind. You know, all these things happening to your body, all of a sudden you kind of think, is it me? Are other people really going through all of this? And when you know the science behind it, once you know all of that stuff, it really does give you a place of, I don't know, calm, and you feel a little bit more in control. There are things that you can definitely do to support those transitions. Yeah, so yeah, that's so fascinating, isn't it? Oh my goodness, the body's just so amazing. And yeah, so tell us, what can we do to help ourselves during this time? What would you suggest?
So for me, one of the really big things is, if you think about when we go through menopause, we're going through midlife experiences, and we can have a lot of our own challenges when we go through midlife, right? So there's a lot of stress, not only about menopause and the transition and all the symptoms we're feeling, but we might also have work pressures. We might have aging parents to look after. We might have kids leaving the nest, so empty nest syndrome, or needing more emotional and financial support. Now, you know, and definitely not always, but often that the buck stops at women. So we've got this kind of roller coaster going on of hormones, as well as the roller coaster of midlife anyway. So a big thing is stress reduction. Because when we feel stressed, it makes everything feel worse. We're going to impact our sleep, which then will impact how well we function in the day, energy levels, cognition, productivity, etc. And actually, estrogen is linked to regulating sleep. So that's another kind of nail in the coffin, if you like, in terms of how we manage our symptoms. You know, when we have sleep taken away, everything can feel a lot more challenging. So when we work with stress reduction, we work with whether it's breathing practices or movement practices or mindfulness practices. So this is kind of the cohesive system, if you like, of yoga therapy. We work at promoting resilience in our nervous system. So instead of being constantly in this kind of sympathetic stress state where our heart is racing, we're not breathing efficiently, our blood pressure is high, none of our systems are really working optimally, not through chronic stress anyway. What we want to do is we want to bring ourselves out of that. We want to reduce our heart rate. We want to slow it down. We want to reduce our blood pressure. We also want to reduce the amount of stress hormones kind of raging through our body, if you like. And when we do all of that, we also reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, which stress is a major, major contributor for, right? Now, we know that many women experience anxiety and depression through menopause, and obviously that brings its own stress with it as well. So all of this can have a really positive impact on mental health, because we know when we feel our mental or experience mental health issues, we're not going to be breathing efficiently. We might not have positive lifestyle behaviors, so good nutrition, good movement practices, good sleep practices. So it impacts everything stress does. So for me, reducing stress is really important for women to help them manage their life experience from a more kind of resilient place, if you like.
I think it's a very interesting thing what you're talking about, because we have kind of those three little stages. We've got the perimenopause, menopause, and the postmenopause, and that's quite interesting. Having gone through those, I think I must be postmenopause now. Not really sure, which actually is really, really why I'm doing this, because women in this 2023, we should know about these changes. We sort of shuffle through periods and menstruation when we're younger, and then we shuffle through pregnancy and giving birth to our babies, or deciding not to have children. That's another important narrative that we need to change. That's okay. Whatever women want to do is absolutely their choice. And then we get to the menopause.
Also women that can't have children.
Absolutely.
And the impacts then of going through menopause and having that, you know, taken away for sure. I mean, that's another really important narrative to consider.
Yes, and those who have hysterectomies, for example, or operations, or go through, you know, problems, early menopause because of the removal of certain hormones, and estrogen production needs to be reduced because of possible, you know, cancers, operations, things like that. You know, there's all sorts of things that impact our bodies and our hormones and how we change, and then not to really know about this massive change in our lives is strange to me, really odd that I've come to this point in my life and I don't actually have that much information. So this is why I'm doing these podcasts. I think we need to just keep talking about it. And when you were talking about the stress as well, the stress reduction, what comes with stress reduction from my point of view is this incredible body awareness. And when you get that body awareness, when you're embodied, you start to think about yourself a lot more. You're so more self-aware, And then all sorts of things start to float to the surface to be addressed. And things like adopting a really positive lifestyle in terms of thinking about what you're eating for yourself, thinking about the exercise, thinking about your mindset, and the things that you can do to really empower yourself at this point in your life. I think that also is an interesting aspect of the whole menopausal journey. What do you think of that?
I totally agree, and I love that word embodied. I love that word embodied, because how many women do you hear kind of say, I just don't feel like myself. I
Yes.
feel like my body doesn't belong to me. My mind doesn't belong to me. I'm uncomfortable in my own skin. I've lost confidence. I don't feel like I have any self-worth. And these are big words, you know, they're very, very powerful. And I think through the practice of yoga therapy, where we can help is provide women with a much more interoceptive experience.
Yes.
So interoception is, you know, paying attention to internal sensations, right? So noticing when you feel the stress rising, or noticing how you respond to things. How does it feel in your body, your skin, your heart? You know, all of this type of stuff that we don't pay a lot of attention to day to day. And through kind of movement and mindfulness practices, we do create a more embodied space for women to feel more like themselves, to pay more attention, to make better decisions, if you like, from a more embodied place, like eating well. Well, how does that make me feel compared to when I don't eat well? You know, how do I feel when I move compared to when I don't? And this leads to greater confidence and feelings of self-worth. And we, you know, we can work with women and help create this space for them. And I think that's so invaluable, and it's empowering. So, like you say, learning learning more about the process that we go through does give us a sense of more empowerment, because we understand the process and our body more. So yeah, it's really important. And funny you said about kind of going through the process and becoming more aware of maybe how you want to be or an approach life, for example. I spoke to a lady the other day at one of my workshops, and she said, you know what's, now I'm kind of post-menopause, I'm learning to say no.
Yes,
And set
definitely.
boundaries, clear boundaries, and I'm okay with that. And people are responding well. They might be a little bit taken aback, but I'm saying no to what does not work for me now, because I spent my whole life saying yes and doing things for other people. You know, she's a mum, work, etc.
Absolutely.
And actually, clear boundaries is really important for stress reduction, and it's empowering.
I think that's another thing that yoga therapy's taught me as well, is I think I come from, I mean, I'm a 1960s woman, born in the late 60s. And, you know, as I was growing up, it was very much about, you know, being seen, being learning to sort of step back, let everyone else have their voice. And so it was very interesting to be in this time where I actually think, oh, bollocks to that. I'm going to actually be who I want to be. I mean, I feel like I've done that in my life anyway. I feel I've been allowed to be like that because of who I am. And, you know, I'm a white woman. I'm allowed to have that voice. It's socialized in a sort of, you know, that's the way our kind of culture is. And things are definitely changing, which is super good. And at a time where we have got this change happening for all women of all color, and we're all changing together in a very strange way. We're all empowering ourselves in a really wonderful way. And I'm on a learning journey about that. And thanks to the yoga therapy, it's very much about, okay, I've come to this point in my life. It's a massive transformation. I'm suddenly kind of seeing what's going on in the world. And I think it's time to be who I want to be. And it's time to really sort of have a voice, be more inclusive, and to understand what's actually going on socially in the world as well. Does that make sense? It's like changing a
This
narrative
totally makes
that's
sense.
been so old. And none of this kind of like you become an old hag or you become an old crone. It's actually, no, I feel great at this age. Yes, the menopause is a tough old time, but it's a transformation, and it's kind of like an awakening to a new person, a new world almost to live in.
And I think that's really important. It's kind of, you come into a certain stage of life, you're like, well, I want to stand in my power. I have a
Mm.
voice. I have things to say. I'm valued. I need to be heard. I need to be seen.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of women speak like that when they've come, through the process, or certainly post-menopause. It's like they feel this vitality, like they're in this next stage of life, which is actually really positive.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean to say that hasn't been challenging, of course, but actually, there's none of this being thrown on the scrap heap business. It's like, I am who I am. I'm going to stand in that, and I'm going to own it, and not be ashamed of that, and
Absolutely.
that's so important.
It is. It's really important because I definitely, growing up, I believe that although I'm kind of a strong character, I know what I want to do and what I don't want to do. I was definitely sexualized as a young girl, definitely. And I was in the theatre world, and it was very much about how you looked and how you behaved, and things would happen, and you would giggle, and you were uncomfortable with that what was going
Mm,
on, but didn't feel the confidence to say no a lot of the time, and all of that rubbish. And I think that sometimes when you get a little bit older and wiser, you do start to feel, actually, you know what, I can actually sense this in my body, that doesn't feel right for me anymore. I want to be truthful and authentic, and so I'm going to live a slightly different life. I do feel that as I've got older, I'm taken a lot more seriously. I feel like I've gained a lot more respect, but I think that's probably to do with my attitude and how I want to live my life now. So yeah, definitely this is what, yoga has definitely taught me, this way of being in my own skin and being happy with that. No
mm.
matter all the rubbish that we're fed in the media, I'm happy. And this is what I want other women to feel, is just to be happy in their own skin, and just live their best lives, really. Though that's got lots of narrative behind it as well, hasn't it?
Well, I think, yeah, there's so much to be said for everything that you've just said, and I think it doesn't mean that there's not challenges. It
Mm,
means that, I suppose, coming from a yoga therapeutic point of view, when you work with your body more, your mind more, so mindfulness type practices, it just means that you approach those challenges differently. It means that you embrace change, potentially. You know that nothing is permanent. And I think the less we resist the changes that we go through, whether it's menopause or other lifestyle changes, we develop a capacity to kind of move with the changes that we're experiencing rather than fighting against them. And recognize that life isn't permanent. We're surrounded by change all the time, and it's actually one of the only things we can totally guarantee, right? So when we come back to kind of bare bone type experiences of what's going on in this moment, even if you're sitting there and it's a breath work practice, okay, can I just be with my breath? I know my mind will wander, but I'm going to keep coming back to my breathing. It's allowing ourselves to pay attention to the present moment on purpose. And when you develop a skill like that, which is an ongoing lifetime skill, there's definitely no quick fix for that. I think it helps you develop the capacity to be with what's uncomfortable sometimes from a slightly more, not disconnected space, but maybe more objective,
yeah,
rather than
yeah.
soaking up everything and feeling overwhelmed by it. Encourage us to take a step back and go, okay, can I create a bit of space?
Mm,
And how can I
very
respond
nice.
to that, which might be different to my narrative up until that point. And I think it's important to know that we aren't defined by our narrative over the years and our past experiences, all those imprints that have been left on our bodies and our minds. And it's coming back to that present moment experience, which can be challenging. It can be
So,
challenging to try and sit with what's difficult.
we've got, just going back to perimenopause is a time where our periods, our menstruation is a little bit different and erratic, and sometimes it will stop and then sometimes it comes back. There's irregularity. And then we come into the menopause. Now that kind of sandwiched between peri and post. So tell us a little bit about that period of time, menopause.
Well,
That period of time.
my understanding is that menopause is once you have had no periods for 12 months, and then you're postmenopausal.
Right.
I don't think there's necessarily a gap there, from my understanding. Your periods stop, and once that's been consecutive for 12 months, you're in menopause, and then you're actually postmenopause. Like I said, I'm not sure there's a period of time between the two. Perimenopause is easier to decipher, if you like, because as long as you've still got periods and your hormones are fluctuating, you're perimenopausal.
Yeah.
But once they've stopped for 12 months, you're then postmenopause.
Because I kind of think that little bit, that year is kind of when that's the confusion bit. That was for me. That was the kind of, oh shit, what's going to happen now? You know, I've heard that all of this is going to happen to me now. What's going to happen? And actually, when I came into when all of that period of time was over and I went into postmenopause, it was actually a huge relief, because I think that was the most stressful. You were talking about stress. That was the time when I needed to really hone in on all those regulation tools and to really embrace a slightly different yoga practice. So before, I was doing very high energy yoga. You know, it felt like I could do anything with my body. And then it was that period of time when I started to really notice the itchy skin, or the restless legs, or fatigue. Oh my goodness, a lot of fatigue. With that came that stress and then confusion because of all the stuff that's going on in the brain. So I think, would you agree that that's a time to really possibly change your yoga practice slightly, or to embody other areas of yoga? Because I think we do have this kind of, you know, aesthetic yoga practice versus a therapeutic yoga practice. And I think that's where, you know, our yoga therapy training comes in can really offer those going through this time, this transition, a really different way of being with yourself, rather than trying to, you know, stay with the stuff that used to work. You know, the high energy yoga. I mean, I used to be an Ashtanga yoga practitioner, and I just cannot do that at the moment. That's not where my body wants to go. My body needs much more nurturing, much more time to process movement quality, to process strength, to process the breath, meditation. All of that seems to be, it doesn't mean I can't dance around and be energetic. It just means it's different. It's more therapeutic. I'm not trying to grasp something anymore. It's just how it is. It just feels like I'm in a river and I'm flowing along, rather than trying to grab something, which is, you know, in yoga, a parigraya, trying to grasp something. What am I trying to grasp? Actually, what am I trying to grasp? I'm never going to be a size 8.
I think that's interesting, because I think what word kind of comes to mind there is honor. It's a time to honor your body for what it needs. And I think, again, coming back to that sense of grasping, I think it would be normal for women to grasp, for us to go, but where, you know, for some women it's about losing their youth, for some women it's not. So for some women it might be about grasping and trying to hold on to what it was before the changes started to happen, before your periods start to fluctuate, before you start to sense into those symptoms. It's quite normal to go, but I'm not ready. I don't want that to happen yet. So it's about trying to let go of that, which is challenging. But like you say, one way to do that is to take it slowly, tune into what your body needs through all the practices that we've been discussing. And actually, for some, there is a time to slow down and to honor what your body needs. And our bodies respond really positively to that. You know, if we don't keep pushing and grasping and striving for it to be a certain way, and like you say, go with the flow like a river, right? Well, can I just be fluid during this time? And for me, it's consistency. Keep showing up, even when I don't want to, when I feel like I've got no time. Keep coming onto the mat. And it doesn't even have to be the mat. It doesn't have to be yoga. Whatever you enjoy. It might be embroidery. It might be going for a walk. It might be coffee with a friend. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you're kind of listening.
It's really interesting to me because you know, obvious things would be, this is where I feel that yoga therapy could be a really wonderful tool, because it offers that sort of inquiry of oneself. It's the obvious thing is, okay, let's look at your diet, let's look at your exercise, da 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 da. But with our yoga therapy practice, what we also offer is a kind of inquiry. And yes, that's sensing into your body, interoceptive sensation, being aware of what's going on and how that affects our thoughts and behaviors. But what we also have to deal with, I think, as women in our society is very much about, yes, the losing of youth. I mean, plastered all over our media, social media, TV. Even when you walk in, I mean, it's changing. We are seeing women, real women now, in our media, which is fantastic. But there is that thing of having to let go of years and decades of women remaining young, women remaining youthful in order to be seen as beautiful beings. And that, for me, is an interesting one, because it's definitely come up. You know, it's definitely part of it. Part of this transition is, oh, golden age, vintage, as my children call me. But, you know, it's kind of that with that comes a kind of inner power that we talked about earlier, is a kind of self-confidence of, actually, I've lived a bit, I've been around the block, and I kind of know who I want to be and who I am. And actually, you know, I set up a little walking group on the basis that we just walk, we talk, and it's just being with other women of the same sort of age, going through the same sort of things, and saying, you know what, this is great. We can go for a walk if we want. We can do this, we can do that. And we've got the time and the space to do it. So, yeah, what do you think about that, Lindsey?
I mean, first of all, how therapeutic is that, right? Walking with women who have got each other's backs. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of in maybe social media. What is coming up for me is that there is a lot of support, like between women wanting to lift each other up, not bring each other down, which I think has been the case over the years.
Rise together, right? Rise together.
Together, for sure. And I do think, like you said, I do think the narrative is definitely changing. And I've mentioned before, actually, this is before you press record, that I'm currently working on a menopause guide for the workplace for a HR wellbeing platform called Trio. And, you know, it's really about how much women have to offer the workplace. If they can be supported in the workplace by their employers, which there's a lot of that starting to come into play now, there's a lot more global awareness of the potential to support women and then growing their potential within the business, because they've got years of experience. They know their stuff. There should be room for promotion still. There should be room for more training if wanted. All of this. Yet suddenly women leave work because of the menopause, or because their symptoms are so challenging they can't cope, and they don't want to tell work about it because they feel, because of the stigma. So I know all of this is improving, but it's very slow. There's still a lot more that employers can do. but it is highlighting that actually you've got years of experience here and we have so much to offer, and that should be nurtured rather than impeded. So that's kind of my view on that. I know I've kind of gone into the workplace a bit there, but that's
No,
really important for
so important. I've heard lots of things about that kind of work now, which is fantastic. Tell us a bit more then about the workplace, well, the stuff that you're doing in the workplace. What does that involve?
So the business I'm doing some work for, Trio, it's a wellbeing platform, and what I've created for them, separate to the guide, is basically a 6-month flow, if you like, to help women through those first initial months. And for that, I've developed breath work and mindfulness practices and movement practices, along with a lot of psychoeducation about what's going on in the body, what to expect, what maybe not to expect, because we're all different. You know, we all have our own unique makeup, and it's kind of honoring that about ourselves, and knowing that we might only get one symptom or we might get 15. We just don't know, but it's coming from a deeper place of trying to understand what's going on and how can I help mitigate some of those symptoms through holistic therapeutic practices. So I've developed that, and now I'm moving into developing a guide for the workplace, so employees and employers have something to a guide to refer to, a policy document, if you like.
This is fantastic. So anyone listening out there, please get in touch with Lindsey. We need this in the workplace for sure. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I'm really pleased to see all these changes. It is happening. I do see change. And yeah, with your kind of work, with your kind of approach, there's going to be even better change. So well done. I'm really proud of you, and I'm really supportive of anything that you're doing, Lindsey. And like I say, anyone who's really interested in getting in touch with Lindsey about anything that we've discussed, all the details will be in the narrative below. But otherwise you can just message us and we'll get in touch. So Lindsey, what before we leave, is there anything that you want to offer out there to anybody? Go for it.
I think it's really important that when we go through this transition, we don't see it as just as a hormone deficiency, if you like, because it makes it very much just kind of a medical thing that we're going through. And actually there's something called the biopsychosocial model, which really allows us to consider all aspects of our life. You know, it's not just the changes in our body that we can work with positively, but it's also lifestyle factors. So, you know, so from the biopsychosocial model, if you like, what's our mental health like, our emotional and mental well-being, what are our coping skills like, our physical health. On the social side, you know, what are our familial relationships like? Do we have work stress, family stress? Where else can we look at in our lives that we can positively impact, rather than just focusing on menopause and what it's doing to us? Like, well, where else can I make positive inroads? And that would be one thing that I would say is worthwhile considering as well.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Lovely. I love it. Okay, so tell us where we can find you.
Okay, so my website is liveyogatherapy.com. I'm on Instagram as liveyoga_therapy. That's probably the two main places, actually. So you can get in touch with me in either of those. And I'm not the best on Instagram, but you can definitely still find me there.
Brilliant. No problem at all. Thank you so much. Been really wonderful talking to you as always. And we're hoping to do something next year, aren't we?
Yes. Oh my goodness, our 2024 retreat.
Yeah, in March.
Yes. In March, in a gorgeous location in Seaford by the sea. And it's going to be a women's health well-being weekend retreat.
Yeah.
And we're, working on that as we speak.
So get in touch with us if you would like to join us. It's going to be very therapeutic and very positive and wonderful. So as always, cathyunderwoodyoga.com if you need to contact me. But in the meantime, I wish you well. I hope this has been useful. Please let us know your feedback, any comments, always positive, of course, constructive comments, please. And yeah, I wish you a really wonderful day. Thank you, Lindsey. Lots of love.
Thank you very much.